Hello, my name is Faizan and today I am going to be presenting you my game prototypes for this coursework. Firstly, talking about the game. The game is called Invasion and it is a first-person shooter and a zombie survival game. Uh, the main goal of the game is to survive the waves of zombies that spawn around the map by shooting them and making sure you do not take damage from the zombies. This game was developed in four different sprints, which I'm going to be demonstrating and explaining you right now. The first sprint was in the first sprint involved the designing and the implementation of the game map. From figure one, you can see that firstly I started off by making a simple drawing of a game map where the player is in the middle and the player is in the middle of a crossroad and is surrounded by different buildings. And I thought this was good idea with having the zombies spawn from these crossroads with the player at the center. So after which I started implementing this design in Unity, which you can see from the second figure. And the the buildings were made using simple cubes, while planes were used for the roads and the walls. I have also added these alleyways in the map, which could act as the spawning points for the zombies as it would be better than having them spawn like right in front of the player on these roads. So the zombies would be hidden in these alleyways, and these alleyways will also be blocked for the player so that they cannot enter them, while the zombies can still move through them and try to target the player. In the third figure, you can see that I'm trying to make the cubes a bit more building likes, and I also added a few more alleyways as I thought the previous number was a bit too less. And finally, in the fourth figure, I added the various assets and decorations to give the game a map a more rustic or rundown feeling. And as you can see from this figure, there are these trees, the barricades which block the player but still allow the zombies to pass through them. And these barriers also hide the zombies so that the player can't see where the zombies are. Now, the reflection for the sprint, the first talking about the issue, the main issue was finding the correct assets for the map as it proved very difficult as the University's asset store did not have the assets as I wanted. They don't have any free assets, nor did many sites on Google. But I finally was able to find a free good site and which helped me achieve the rustic and rundown feeling of of the map, which and the site also allowed me to find the assets for the zombies. So that was a plus as well. Now, moving on to the second sprint, which involved the development of the character and the enemy. But before that, I would like to demonstrate the game as it will help explain the results of both the first sprint, as you can see the map from the demonstration, and also you can see the character that enemies as they've been implemented. Uh, first on this, as you can see, this is the game map. You spawn in the middle, and these are the zombies which run after you. You can also shoot these zombies, and if you shoot them enough times, they they die, as you can see. And as you can see, this boss zombie spawned from that spawn point, but I was not really able to see it as it was hidden. And this area is also, I'm not able to enter them, but the zombie can still walk through them. And in the bottom corner, you can see my health. As the zombies collided with me a bit, I took damage. And if they collide with enough times, I die, and the game restarts with all the zombies and zombies respawning and me respawn in the middle of the map. And yeah, that's it for the demonstration. I'll uh, now the sprint. The main feature of the sprint too are the characters and the zombies. So character, the most important detail of the character are the movement of both the character and the mouse, and the shooting of the weapon. The movement of the characters can be explained using the code here. So this is for the movement of the mouse or the cursor. Firstly, I get the X and Y axes and use the transform to rotate function to set the movement of the mouse. And the movement of the mouse in the y-axis or the vertical axis is also clamped or fixed at a maximum of 90 degrees, both in up and down direction. This prevents the player from infinitely moving either on either direction so as to not make them sick and get dizzy. Next, the movement of the character was done in similar way by getting the getting the horizontal vertical axes whenever they press the WASD keys or the arrow keys, and instead of using a rigid body and physics for the character movement, I have instead used the character controller and using character controller.move function and by the and using vector 3 and the values received from this this received from the get access methods, I can move the character in the desired location. And finally, for the characters, the gun. The fire with the gun is done by sending a raycast, and whenever a ray is fired from the camera position, which is the center of the screen, and which is also the crosshair, as you saw from the demonstration. In the middle of the screen was a crosshair, which a ray is fired from. It's fired in the forward direction, and whenever the ray hits the zombie collider, it sends out the true function, which tells the game manager that a zombie has been hit, and thus it takes damage. And that's it for the details of the character. Next is the zombie. With the most important function of the zombie is being able to navigate around the map and to actually aim and target the player. This was achieved using a nav mesh, as you can, and this was using nav mesh, the nav mesh agent. So the nav mesh is created by baking and baking the nav mesh and setting only the assets like roads as static, while assets like the decorative assets like these poles, the bricks, or the barriers are non-static. So only the static assets have this blue layer on top of them, which means the nav mesh is big, allowing the nav mesh agent which you can see, allowing the nav mesh agent to only walk through the baked areas. And by setting the agent's destination as the player's current position, we can ensure that the zombie always tries to reach the player's position. And once the zombie collides with the player takes damage. And if and the next important feature of the zombie is actually spawn the zombies, and this was done by setting the zombie character as a prefab firstly, and having the various spawning spawn points and they use alleyways as the array, which is randomly picked using random dot range. And once the spawn point is picked using instantiate, a duplicate of the zombie prefab is spawned at that spawn point. And talking about the game loop, how the round begins or ends. The round or ends when either all the zombies are killed, and which means the next round begins, or if the player gets killed instead, which results in the round restarting with all the player and all the zombies respawning again. Talking about reflections for the sprint, the feedback received as is that the player is very confused once the game starts, as the game begins and zombies spawn right at the launch of the game, which gives the player little to no time to react. And secondly, there's very less feedback from the game, which means you do not know if your shot set a zombie or not, and you also do not know if you take a damage from the zombie from behind without seeing your health in the corner. This can be fixed in the future works of the game by adding more UI and feedback options using effects or using sound effects, and by also adding menus and and screens to give the player a bit of time to react before the game begins. Now moving on to the third sprint, which involved the creation of implementation of the UIs and menus. We- First, I'll start with the demonstration of the game. Um, Demonstration of the game. Yeah. As you can see, first I created with a menu with a eerie or a scary background music, which fits the theme of the game. And I've also added two different game modes for the player to choose. The regular game mode is easier as the player has to survive for only 10 rounds, while the endless game mode, the player can continue playing as long as they have any HP remaining by the end of the round. So for the demonstration, I'll just pick the regular mode, and as you can see, that 3 second delay before the game starts, and the zombies are spawning, and there are also sound effects. There are also sound effects as the gunshot or the player taking damage. There's also proper HP bars which show how much HP I have and how much HP the zombie has. So I'll and you can also see I have ammo at the bottom corner, so which prevents the player from just spam clicking. I'll show you what happens once I've run out of ammo. So I'm prevented from spam clicking and killing all the zombies in that game by having to reload and being unable to shoot. So uh, once all the zombies have died, the next round begins. Uh, and and once I'm out of health, the game ends, and it tells me how many rounds I survived and how many zombies I've killed. So with that, I can either play again, which is restart the game from the round one, or I can exit. So I'll just exit for now. Now talking about the third sprint. As you saw from the demonstration, your elements and sound effects were added to provide feedback to the player. Sound effects like the player hurting sound effect and the shooting sound effect that it, and as you shot and actually hit the zombie, you can see the HP bar decreasing. You can also see your own HP bar decreasing if you take damage. I had also added game modes, but game modes which are regular and endless. But as these game modes are in a different scene, and it is not really easy to send information from one scene to another using but using player preferences or player pref dot set string, I was able to set the choice and send this choice from the main menu scene to the game manager, which sets the limit for if the player is chosen regular or endless. Now, talking about the reflections, which reflection of the sprint. Firstly, the feedback received was that this game is very repetitive, and as there's only one type of zombie that spawns, and in the end, it becomes very boring, and the player will just play a few rounds and then quit. I don't, which that pretty much doesn't make the game fun at all. And the next feedback was that you were not able to know if the zombie is behind you and attacks you before actually getting hit first and losing HP. This is a waste. This is a pretty much waste of HP, and you will not be able to survive much long. This is also an issue faced as it should have been solved using audio effects. I had planned to add the zombie growling effect on the effects for the zombie sound hurting, but they just would not work, and thus is the issue. But moving on, talking about the success, I was able to make the prototype from the second sprint much less confusing and properly playable. And as I've achieved that, I moved on to stress testing the game for the fourth and final sprint. And I did this by infinitely spawning the zombies and from the figure 7 you can see the once the zombie count hit the 600 plus mark, my game started lagging. It was not bad. I was still able to move around and shoot them, but the zombies would spawn at a much faster rate as than I was able to kill them. And once that zombie mark hit the 2000s, my game started freezing, and in the end, I shut down the game as it was just not playable. And to have a 600 zombies spawn at one point, the player has to reach round 500 plus, which is possible, but it is very, very unlikely. So I did not think it was much optimization was needed. And the another reason for not optimizing was using the was me using the universal render pipeline template from Unity, which pretty much helped in increasing the FPS of the game by having but also allowing better graphics and shaders. And now talking about future works of this game. Firstly, adding new zombie variants or elite zombies to make the game a bit more have a bit more variety for the game and make it more difficult. Next is adding more gun types like pistols or rifle or snipers or grenade launchers. Or also adding consumables like health pack to get your HP back after each round or during each round. Next, third, and probably the most important point of important future work would be trying to make this game. tend to have a multiplayer option for the game, but also keep the current single player. Next would be trying to expand the map, if trying to expand the map so that the game is not congested if the multiplayer option was added in the future. And I maybe would also try adding a very simple radar so you are able to know if there's a zombie behind you or not, if the sound effects still do not end up working. And yes, that is pretty much it for this presentation. Thank you very much.